Swiftly, the people of the village of Red Rock start gathering up whatever it is they've been doing and dashing into their homes and places where they've been staying as the calls are sent out to douse any braziers or flames. Signs of the tempest is starting to circle around, coming in from the north. As the fires have been doused, 20 or so, 30 minutes later, the different members of the hunting party start coming in. They huddle on the inside of the gate, waiting for each person to make sure everyone has come back. And the captain of the party waits there and waits there. And as he counts each person and checks in with each one, he notices that there's still one member that hasn't come back. As the last person to come in is still with them, he says, "Hey, have you seen that lass from Tizerbrook at all?" And the other hunter shakes their head and is like, "Nah. I mean, if rumors are to be true, maybe something caught her out there." The captain sighs as he looks to the gate that is now closed and catching the last remnants of smoke dissipating from any braziers or fires that were doused. Says, "Well, I guess when we have signal that the tempest has passed, we'll have to do a recovery." And hello! So, welcome back to another episode of Unbound Lands, our solo Ironsworn tabletop RPG campaign. You're pretty far in, we're 9 episodes. That's pretty dope. So just first and foremost, get introduction started. If you don't know who I am by now, I'm Natalie. See it underneath my chin here. You can find me all the places with ghostcandle.com, or I almost called myself .com, Ghost Candle Studio on most social medias, or if you're here on Twitch, Ghostly Candle, that's LY. Which of course, give me follows. I'm getting closer and closer to affiliates, so I'd appreciate it. Or if you're seeing this as a VOD on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe. We're playing Ironsworn, which is a tabletop RPG made by Shawn Tomkin. You can find it. The base vanilla game is for free on ironswornrpg.com. I'm not sponsored or being paid for this in any way. This is just me playing it for fun on Twitch. But if you do like what I do and want me to continue doing it, whether for this or anything else that I do on stream, consider finding me on Ko-Fi, where it's ko-fi.com/ghostcandle. That's the best place to tip me because anyone supports there, they get behind the scenes stuff or supporter only content. And there's different ways to support me there. You can tip me, you can buy from my shop where I do emotes, or you can commission me to do character art. Otherwise, there's also just the stream elements tips as well. And I got a throne wish list if you want to get me a present, some sort of physical good. Sure. And I think that's about it. So why don't we start switching on over to our story? So where we left off. That morning, Eldrid was called upon to join the hunting party, as everyone has been told that beyond just their training towards the coming battle against the foreign invaders, they would also have to do things to help the community and keep themselves alive, to pull their weight. Eldrid, her main skill being archery and thus a hunter with it, was conscribed into being part of the hunting party whenever she was called upon. But she was this day. As she went out and was told to watch for the markers to know if she's going too far into dangerous territory. She had found deer tracks and was getting ready to hunt one down, and after a couple hours into the mid part of day, there was a trio of bone walkers, just skeletons made animated, roaming about. And out of a need, as always for Eldrid, she wanted to get a strike in first and entered battle with these 3 bone walkers. She did manage to defeat them without getting a scratch. But during that fight, she was taking note on the temperature dropping quite rapidly, and at one point even looked up into the sky and seeing no smoke trails coming from the direction of Red Rock. But in her fight with the bone walkers, as she was running around and trying to keep her distance, which was hard as they move very quickly when they catch sight of something living, she didn't realize how far off her hunting path she's gone. And she tumbled into an opening when she was starting to try and find a direction to run. And in that opening, she was greeted, essentially, by just this open space, and within it, a swirling kind of cyclone of wind and snow and ice, as she's basically come right in face to face with the Tempest. So as the realization starts to hit Eldrid, she hears the howling of the wind and is feeling all that heat from her body start to dissipate, and chills just permeating through her. She starts backing up into the tree line. Her thoughts in a mad rush of what to do, or entering just a blank state. It keeps flipping of, I gotta do something, and it keeps hitting that roadblock of thought. As that is happening, and she's watching this swirl before her, just all these parts of the Tempest, she sees within it almost figures made out of the swirling snow and ice. It's very, very subtle when it's against the snow, but when there's the dark backdrop of the near black tree bark from the woods, she can just catch the slightest hint of form. And amongst the swirling, wintry howls of the wind, she hears very hushed voices. And though she had ran into this clearing headlong, not knowing what danger was before her, she's realizing the Tempest isn't rapidly coming at her. And she does feel that winds turn and turbulate and start to rotate towards her. It's not as aggressive as that night, that first day when they were on the road and it came across them. And as she looks upon it, the wind's now just biting at her cheeks, and she can feel it stinging any exposed skin on her. Within that swirl, she sees almost dance of figures come up and tighten close around the center. Kind of this eye of the storm, so to speak. And she continues to hear these almost ghostly voices, soft hushes and whispers. Eldrid continues to back, almost waiting for a moment to trigger her into running to see if this tempest will come straight at her. But she keeps hearing those ghostly hushes. And that cyclone slowly turning and starting to wash over in her direction. And in those hushed voices, sometimes she hears words. Warmth, flames, fire, stop. And Eldrid, almost in a frightened state, still feeling every ounce of heat dissipate from her, staring up into the cyclone. Half confused state, but also knows she can't outrun this and is willing to try anything. Starts calling out to it. That maybe there's some sort of intelligence or something to this being, this whatever magical entity this could be. So she calls out and she says, "Tempest, do you hear me?" And though her voice is overpowered by the winds, she does hear some voices almost echo back. Hear me, here. And then she calls again, saying, "Tempest, do you understand me?" And then there's another patterned hush voices saying, understand me. Okay, Eldrid, very much confused by the idea of she is speaking now with the Tempest, says, "What is it that you wish for?" Wish, warmth, wish, heat, wish. As the rushing of wind starts to continue to kind of wave over her bustling of hair just all over the place, her skin turning bright, almost tomato red from it being hit, and she's having to raise up her arms and trying to protect herself against it. She calls again. Is that why you came to the Havens? Seeking flame? And again, the whispers echoing back. Flame, flame, fire, flame, heat. Stop. And stop. Eldrid repeats back. What do you mean by stop? And the voices continue hushed and whispered, swirling within almost this noise counseling chamber of howling wind. And she just keeps hearing from them. Stop. Stop. Fire. Flame. Stop. And Eldrid now essentially shouting over the cyclone, the rushing winds that are now battering against her, and her continuing to try and back away towards the tree line, hoping that maybe the trees will break it up. She says, stop what? Stop us? Stop the invaders? Stop what? And the voices don't echo back anything she can tangibly understand, but she feels the wind rushing past her. And then a tug on her hip where she had tied up the skull from one of the bone walkers. And almost in the unison of voices, she hears, stop. And then she starts to feel almost as though a hand coming into her chest, as though to grip onto her. Voices start to say, heat, give, release. And in that moment, Eldrid realizes that maybe she lingered a little too long. She says back, I don't wish for release. I wish to help my people. And through her shouting, she unleashes the skull from her side and holds it up. She's screaming over the winds, yelling, I wish to protect from this. The moment as she raises up that skull, she almost hears gasping, like a as the winds part for a second and lift back and up before swirling back into the cyclone. And in that moment, she feels the release on her chest. And while the Tempest is reacting, she quickly turns and dashes into the woods, aiming for the thickest part of the trees to hopefully break up any of the wind, which she knows she cannot exactly outrun. But she does turn, trying to put the skull back onto her hip, attaching it back in, and taking her bow. She didn't quite understand what shape this Tempest has, but in that moment when she had the skull up and the Tempest was reacting to it, whatever dark magic may be in the skull. For a moment, within the center of the cyclone of the Tempest, she saw this one figure shape. And in the heart of it, just very faintly, you can barely see it, but some sort of crystalline orb there, just like the eye of the storm, essentially. She turns and runs and prepares her bow, hoping that if the Tempest does follow her, she can maybe try and strike at anything she saw, the crystalline thing that she saw. So, as Eldrid starts running, not quite entering any fight yet, she's going to run and try and find someplace to secure an advantage, whether cutting out of sight, even though she knows the Tempest can probably sense her heat. Wherever it may go, she's going to try and cut out of sight. Let's see what moves we can do. Also, in this attempt to face danger, she is using her speed. And reacting. So we're going to actually do a face danger and roll edge, because she's going to be running to try and get distance and utilizing the trees to make it harder for the Tempest to wind rush her. I don't think we have anything to add that we can add to our face danger. So let us do just a straight edge here. And let me get to player scene, because that will let you guys see what I'm rolling. All right, awesome. So we got a strong hit. Get a momentum. Eldrid starts running, refastening the skull and pulling back forward her bow, while also pulling an arrow from her quiver. She weaves and zigzags in through the trees, starting to hit any vaulting over any big logs or rolling down any like little cliff face to try and break up the space between her and the Tempest. And now as she moves, she's hearing the collection of howling winds and whispered voices rushing in behind her, almost calling out to her. We're going to try and secure an advantage. Again, with edge, now that we've got a little bit of space, that we're not too sure yet for Eldrid how much of a space she has between her and the Tempest. And as she ducks in behind a tree, she's going to take a moment to try and steady herself and aim and try and spot that crystal she saw the moment she was showing off the skull. Very So as she gets her aim, she spots the crystalline thing in the center of the swirling vortex as the winds just get cut up and disjointed as they wrap around the trees, trying to envelop anything in case there is a body or some sort of heat there that it can suck up. So while the winds are churning and doing that, for a brief moment she catches sight of that very faint outline of the crystal and readies her arrow, anchoring it right against the tree. And we are going to enter the fray. And we do have an advantage here. So actually, because of our advantage, we're going to add a +1 to our enter the fray. We'll be with wits, as we have, even though the Tempest knows she's somewhere, Eldrid has managed to get herself in a position to take control. So let's do a quick blah, 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 quick entering. And it is a weak hit, but Eldrid's going to quickly move and take initiative and get into a fight. So we're going to send off an arrow towards that crystal before a tree covers it. She doesn't want to lose sight of it too much if she has to keep moving. Go for a strike. Our shot is lined up, so we get +1 on momentum if we hit. Okay. One advantage, so we're gonna roll it. Hit. So inflict our harm and lose initiative. And we're actually going to do a extra shot. We can do this once with our combat talent archer. So, because we don't want to lose sight of that crystal. So first the shot goes off and she sees it ping off that kind of icy object. And she knows she just signaled where she was, so she's going to pull out another arrow and release another shot. With it, we suffer actually we get to re-roll 1 die, so we're going to re-roll that 9. Yay, so that made it a strong hit now. So I guess mechanically what I'll explain what I did is with our combat talent, if I'm in a strike or clash, I can make an extra shot with our supply. So you lose 1 supply and we can reroll any die. So since that 9 was pretty high, we had a pretty good collective, we rolled it and we did better. So now we have a strong hit. So you get to inflict harm on this creature. So after that initial ping, the other arrow did just kind of bounced off, having a hard time going through the winds. The vortex of it starts to turn and ready to come towards her. Eldrid releases another arrow and volleys another one. Now with a better idea of where it is, and it goes straight on forth and strikes it. to harm off. All right. But now the winds turn and Eldrid starts moving off again, darting between the trees, trying to give herself as much cover as well as potential hiding to try and keep her edge over this tempest as the winds continue to warp the woods, and hearing the cracking of trees, and any dead tree or branch is just cracking on down, and everything starting to get flattened around her and behind her. But she's going to continue moving forward, trying to keep that distance. And when she's able to make another turn and loosen off another arrow, just catching in between two trees. Let's get momentum from that last one. All right. So let's do our other edge strike. No bonuses this time. Ooh. Doubles on both ends. That's pretty cool. Okay. So in this moment, as she kind of leaps out and skidding through the snow and volleys another arrow, she watches it come and strike into that floating crystal in the cyclone. And she hears the gasps and howls of the wind, and they kind of pause for a second in reaction to being struck. It's probably a very unusual feeling for this entity to have anything actually attacking it. But in that opportunity, she continues to duck around and is going to come in and I guess she gets to do another free strike in this moment. So first on that edge, did get a harm off. And then on that last one, a weak hit. All right. So she, in that moment, releases another arrow, but already the tempest is starting to gather itself back up. But the arrow does strike it once again. In this opportunity, since it was part of that 2 double roll, don't have to worry about losing initiative for this opportunity. So we're able to have a chance to take or secure an advantage so we don't lose it. So Eldrid's gonna keep moving, keep darting between trees, and volleying over any log or rock that's big enough to put something between her and the tempest. So in a very moment of kind of short, quick-paced action, Eldrid turns back around, starting to, as she climbs up and puts off a large boulder. She turns quick to loosen another arrow. And as the wind's now getting closer and starting to try and pull her towards the center of the tempest, her cloaks and furs just kind of pulling off of her almost. The arrow once again fighting against the winds comes in and strikes it to the heart, and again the tempest reacts and gasps and howls of the winds, and they churn up and around. Now those starting to tighten closer to that circle, and she's seeing whatever figures she saw before moving frantically and now trying to go in between her and that center heart of the tempest. And while Eldrid continues moving on, preparing another arrow to volley, she does hear those whispered voices echoing out, trying to call out to her. Whispering, anger, anger, hatred, anger, store, fire, red. And the word red immediately catches Eldrid. That is the pattern that she's been trying to figure out since entering Red Rock. Does it mean it wishes to do harm to Red Rock? Does it mean red tunics that they're about to fight? What? But right now in this moment, Eldrid can't pause because she feels just that tug of the wind, the bolsterness of it, and feeling those icy shards cutting into any exposed skin and even ripping up the thinner cloths of her clothing. She's gonna come around, readying hopefully a final arrow. We're gonna try to end the fight. So let's go. So in this moment, as she prepares another arrow and starts to anchor herself, she feels the winds start to pull forward on her body, and she starts to feel all the heat come out of her as she does take harm from this entity. So this being a dangerous foe, we actually take 2 to our health. And as she feels the heat of her breath turn chilled and cold, and just every ounce of her trembling, she sends forth that arrow, and she watches as it hits something solid, and just a burst of bluish pale white energy and shards come bursting out. And in that rush, she feels the wind that was once pulling her now just in a rapid rush push her, launching her right off the boulder. And she falls all the way back and hits the snow. For a moment, as she feels her body hit the ground and just snow cover over her, the howling of the wind, the rushingness, and those voices dissipate. But almost in the last breath of this entity, It says, "Stop it." She lays in the snow. Her body trembling. She rolls over, getting herself up, huffing, trying to almost keep moving and adjusting to try and create heat in herself. Her arm numb. Well, maybe not just her arm, but definitely a numbness is fully washed over her. And just ice and snow all stuck in her hair and in the furs and through her cloak, and she just feels the heaviness of it all on her. As she kind of comes up to her knees, trying to catch her breath, she looks towards the skull as she looks past herself towards the skull, and then back in the direction of where the Tempest was before the final strike. There's something going on. Something has disturbed, possibly, all the... I don't know, Eldrid always heard of ancient magics and beings and creatures that have existed almost in myth long before the Ironborn have come here. And for the longest time, many of these things were left as myth. But maybe this coming conflict, the battle that the Red Tunics are bringing upon the lands, the fires and bloodbath, maybe that is upsetting something. But she starts to stand up, really wrapping herself up in her cloak, trying to shake off the snow and ice. She looks over to where the Tempest was, trying to see if maybe she could catch a little bit hint of whatever shard that broke was. It's just too blended in the snow. But in this moment, Eldrid pauses and, in a respectful way, she takes in what she did and says, "I'm sorry that I had to stop you, but I need to survive." And she coughs a bit, trying to... the feeling of coldness just compressing down through her body from that final strike of the Tempest, and she continues, "I don't know what's pulled you forth, if it's the actions of those that have come, or the actions of something else to take advantage, but I guess I'll find out what I have to stop." And with that, she looks up to the skies, trying to find an anchoring of the sun. And after a few moments, She searches to find at least the tracks that led her into this predicament. She starts to walk herself back to Red Rock. And it takes her a long time. There isn't a lot of quickness to her step in this moment. And as much as she started wanting to try and hunt any game, it's not happening. She is too worn, having gone from fighting skeletons to taking down a tempest. Whether it's the tempest, she does not know. But in time, as she moves, maybe an hour later or so, she sees subtle columns of smoke coming up from the settlement of Red Rock. And relieved that at least maybe it was the tempest she fought that was threatening it before, that doused the fires to protect the village. She continues forth, and then maybe another 20 minutes or so, as she's starting to catch the silhouette of Red Rock, she sees a couple figures coming up the trail. And as they do catch sight of her, one prepares an arrow. And she can visibly see the bow readied, as the other one has a hand on a sheathed sword. They approach, calling out to her, saying, "Identify yourself." And Eldrid raises up both her hands and calls back, "I'm Eldrid from Tizerbrook." The one man with the arrow relaxes it. The other man with the sword starts coming up. And he says, "Damn it, lass." And as he approaches, she does recognize him as the captain of the hunting party, the one that usually organizes it. He says, "Why didn't you come back the moment you saw the signals go out?" Well, it's pretty far away. And she kind of lifts her arm looking towards the skull. And the man kind of recoils a bit as Eldrid continues to say, "Had an interesting time. Kept me from coming back. But I should probably talk to the shaman." And the captain points to the skull and he's like, "What is that? Why do you have a human skull? We're supposed to be hunting rabbit and deer." Well, that's, again, a long story. There was skeletons walking around, and that's why I need to talk to the shaman. And the hunter kind of looks at her really almost bug-eyed, like, "Bone walkers?" And Eldrid nods. It's like, "Oh, that is ill omen indeed. All right, you definitely need to talk to the shaman then." And as he's now taking her in, he's like, he almost wants to say something more, but instead just gestures her forward towards the other hunter. And the three of them walk together, heading towards the settlement. As they do, the walk is fairly quiet. They don't really ask Eldrid much questions, but there is an exchange of faces between the captain and the one that he brought with him. And the other one kind of leans into the captain's like, wait, why is there a skull on her? And the captain waves it off. But they continue forward, and by the time they get back, sun is already setting. Redness all in the skies. And while they're entering town, the villagers do start to take note of Eldrid being there. And some hushed whispers about them all, acknowledging whatever presents they may have brought in. Eldrid does her best to kind of use her cloak to hide and cover the skull she has with her, just folding up. But while they're walking in, the captain kind of waves off the other hunters, like, all right, you can go. I'm going to take this one straight to the shaman. And the other one nods and goes on his way. As they're moving, Kiarval catches sight of her and kind of calls out, like, Eldrid, you made it back. He comes on over, gives her a hug, and she's like, yeah, as usual, nothing can truly keep me down. I have vows to fulfill after all. And as he lets go over, he kind of steps back and looks her over. He's like, feels like I'm hugging ice. Are you alright? They thought we were gonna, I don't know, possibly find just a body. And the captain puts a hand on his shoulder. He says, she can tell you more later. I have to escort her to the shaman. And Kiarval raises an eyebrow towards Eldrid. She nods back and is like, I'll explain everything later. And she kind of nods and steps back and watches as Eldrid and the captain continues on through the fairway of the settlement, heading towards the steps leading up to the larger stone building that sits upon the top of this village. They start to come up, and the guards that kind of meander around nod to the hunting captain. And they come to the doorway and enter. And this structure is unusual for Eldrid, though it is unusual for a good portion of at least the havens. Most village settlements are made of wood or thatch and are either just these wooden structures above ground or dugouts within the earth. So having a stone structure is different. But they approach the ornate wooden doorways, carved with various nodding borders and kind of etchings of wyverns on each one that face each other on each door. They swing open into a warm interior, and Eldrid just feels that burst. And that's when she really notices just how frozen and she is. She sees burning braziers on either side entering this stone hall. There is chatter of people now coming to sit for food who stay within the building. A giant hearth at its center. She takes in the smell of soups and meats that are freshly cooked and just simmering within the pots on and around the hearth. She sees the leadership of this town, Fargrim, sitting in a larger chair than the rest. Most are either on benches or stools around tables or the outsides, away from the hearth. He sits in a more ornate, almost throne-like chair. Not obnoxiously designed, but it does have that repeated wyvern pattern just on the head of it that matches the front door. And he does take note as he is chatting with the shaman next to him. He does take note of the two. And the captain turns to Eldrid. He says, "Stand there until I come back." He walks on off. Eldrid just stays and watches his path while also looking back to Fargrim and the shaman. The captain does approach and he comes between the two of them, leaning his head down. She watches as they're whispering something. Fargrim has his attention towards the captain, almost looking down, and seeing his brow furrow very hard. The shaman, as was the first day, has her full attention and eyes focused right on Eldrid. And as the captain is talking and comes to the end of the conversation, the shaman almost has this delight in her almost hag-like face. Just, there's something to it that, unlike the shaman from home, Eldrid is unsettled by this one. This woman, there's just something to her. But once the captain finishes talking, Fargrim nods, looks towards Eldrid, and says something to the captain as he moves to stand up. And the shaman standing up with him. The captain walks back around towards Eldrid. And he says, "They both wish to speak with you. Come." And Eldrid had quite the chill just pouring into her chest and thinking in this moment of warmth from within the building, she could get rid of it. Now a different kind of chill enters her, and she feels a deep concern on what possibly the leadership of Red Rock would want to ask or know of her. Or what they may do if they feel that she is an ill omen and threat to all of their safety. I think that's where we're going to end it for today. It's now an hour later. That's usually where we're going to cut off. So let me get a sip here of water. Really hard to fit in hydration moments when you're solo playing. Excuse me. Get very dry. Anyway, thank you. Oh, didn't want that scene. Thank you so much for joining me in this episode of Ironsworn, or Unbound Lands. I mean, an Ironsworn RPG. We are very excited because that means next week's going to be our 10th episode, our 10th stream. So there we go. And yeah, we took down a Tempest, so that's pretty cool. We get to have experience from that. And now we get to see what leadership may have to say to Eldrid. So thank you once again for joining me. Hope you enjoy the series and continue to enjoy and come back and listen, watch, whatever it is you want to do here. Once again, Natalie, underneath my chin here. You got my name, you got my handle, which I am on most social medias, Twitter, Instagram, where I post about art and tabletops. Heavy focus on D&D, but we also have this. As well as you like what I do, feel free to, following me and stuff is always great support, or you can throw tips my way, either through Stream Elements or on Ko-Fi's the best place. And you can tip, buy from my shop, or order commission. And if you support there, well, you get behind the scenes stuff as well as any supporter only content. So good stuff there. Otherwise, I just realized as I looked at my ring light, I meant to change the color. I'm supposed to change it to this color because we're in winter. But that's okay. This is a solo production. I try my best and we're doing this live, so anyway. Thank you once again. We will see you next Wednesday for more Unbound Lands. Also feel free to come back here on Twitch for all my other stuff, as I am a variety streamer doing art and video games and of course tabletop, and as well as joining me on other channels, Zeal Zaddy, where I play in a D&D campaign, or catch me once in a while on Brambleberry Games when I'm in stuff there. And yeah, I do this for fun. I try and make a story. I try. But we'll see you next time. Bye.